Great. So everyone should know me by now, Melanie Schlotterbeck. I'm part of the Power in Nature Coalition, and I am supporting the coalition by reforming the Central Coast side of things. So I appreciate everyone being here. You're always welcome to invite your friends, your family, your colleagues, whomever, to help build this region up because there are certainly opportunities for funding, and we want to make sure great projects get them and count towards 30 by 30. I, as you know, serve on the Partnership Coordinating Committee, and that is where I came across Nurit Katz from UCLA, Office of Sustainability. And she's, I think about a year or so into the term that she was appointed to. And I'm just going to say, if you ever want an excellent meeting facilitator, she's the one for the job. She's amazing.
Thank you.
I mean that. I've been so impressed. She's been doing a lot with Zone Zero here in Southern California, but today she's actually here to talk to us about kind of the biodiversity side of urban arenas. And she's going to give examples as it relates to biodiversity and policy, and then how we can implement those practices for cities and counties, kind of our local areas. And she'll pull examples from a variety of locations, but I will not delay anymore and go ahead and pass it along to Nurit in order to give the presentation. She is feeling a little under the weather today, so she's not going to be on camera, and we're just going to be incredibly grateful that she showed up at all.
Thank you. That's very kind. Yeah, I think my photo looks much better than my red-nosed face in a hoodie. So I'm gonna be I'm gonna be auditory today, but really excited to engage with you all and nice to see where everyone's from too. Definitely love a lot of the places that you represent and just really nice to connect with everyone. Melanie, I sent, oh, the share request is working. Okay, here we go. So I won't speak for too long. I'll just touch on things at a high level and then we'll have time for conversation and questions. Um, I think some of you might be engaged in some level of urban biodiversity, but I think a lot of people in the 30 by 30 network are often more focused on conserving and preserving natural areas. We decided have me come and talk a little bit about what does it mean to sort of support that work, but in a city context. So, um, biodiversity, as you know, in California, we're a global biodiversity hotspot. And yes, a lot of that is in protected areas, but there's an awful lot of biodiversity right in the city. Los Angeles County is the most populous county in California, also one of the most populous in the nation. 1 in 33 Americans live in LA County. And living here with us are, a few thousand different plants and animals, including more than 50 endangered species. And they're right with us in our urban areas. This is a red-tailed hawk in Koreatown. I co-lead a Raptor study in Los Angeles, and we track nesting hawks and owls throughout the city. So, cities have long been thought of as mainly a problem for biodiversity in terms of loss of habitat due to urbanization. But as the world becomes more urban, cities also represent a great opportunity. And there's lots of studies showing that how we develop our cities and how we transform our cities and how we restore habitat within cities can have a big impact on biodiversity. So that's mostly what I'm going to be talking about. I am dialing in from Los Angeles, which, as I mentioned, very populous county, and Los Angeles City is the largest city within the county. And this is a view of the city from the Santa Monica Mountains, which is one of our most biodiverse areas. And a lot of people, think of LA as, movies and Hollywood and all of these things. But again, it's a lot more biodiversity than people think. And, folks are starting to engage with that more all over. Near where I live in the San Fernando Valley, there's an area called the Sepulveda Basin. And I just wanted to show this Google Map screenshot to give you a sense of where the next photo was taken. But this tiny little bit of water right here, smashed between two freeways, is where I saw this egret. And it just goes to show how even a little bit of green space can really bring you that piece of wild things that Wendell Berry talks about. At UCLA, there's a lot of research happening around nature's impact on human health. Our public health researchers have found that access to green space and parks and access to nature not only impacts our overall wellness, but also actually life expectancy in a significant way. And I'm happy to share that study. We also have a new initiative at UCLA on ecological medicine where they're studying the clinical applications of nature and are working on creating a space, a garden space that will be used clinically and kind of creating that whole field of ecological medicine within medical schools, which is really exciting. So, protecting nature within cities isn't only about non-human living things. It's also about us as people and how we can survive in an urban environment. So what does it mean to manage biodiversity in a city? We have a biodiversity program in the city of LA. It's actually currently in a funding pause, which is disappointing, but we're in a pretty major funding crisis, and the program will continue even despite some of the funding challenges right now. But it was started by a city council motion, and I serve on an expert council along with many others within the city, and we help to develop a set of metrics to assess and track biodiversity for the city. And they fall into these 8 categories: habitat, quality, indicator species, threats, access, education, community action, governance, and management. So it ranges from looking at what percent of our open space is protected to biodiversity curriculum in K through 12 schools, bunch of great stuff. So you can find all of that at lacitysan.org/biodiversity, including the most recent 2025 Biodiversity Index Monitoring Report, which starts to look at how things have changed since the initial index in 2022. Although when you read it, you'll find that a lot of things were left unrated because there's a lack of data. So there's really a lot of kind of funding need to really measure and manage biodiversity in a more meaningful way in the city, but it's still an exciting model. The LA index was based on the Singapore index, but is specific to Los Angeles. Within LA, nature is very much not equitably distributed. And there are many people looking at this. My colleague Eric Wood at Cal State LA and some of his students have done some studies showing that biodiversity in Los Angeles is impacted by historic redlining and racist practices. Colleagues at UCLA at the Luskin Center for Innovation are studying shade equity as well. Our urban forest is very inequitably distributed. So a lot of interesting work in Los Angeles right now, again, looking at that impact of nature and biodiversity distribution on people. So how do we change this? There's a lot that we can do within different, areas of the city. In addition to serving as Chief Sustainability Officer for UCLA, I serve right now as Vice President of the Board for the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, which is the largest public utility. And so we, along with other city departments, report on biodiversity progress to the city's biodiversity program. And we have a lot of different initiatives. I passed a motion on the board to really integrate biodiversity throughout our operations. But some of that can be through, educational, gardens and demonstration gardens. DWP has a turf replacement program, which other utilities may have similar programs. I know MWD has a turf rebate, basically incentivizes replacing turf grass for water savings with drought tolerant and hopefully native plants, which can make a big impact. Another major, strategy within cities can be depaving. So there was just a big report released by my colleagues at Arla that made the LA Times called Depave LA that basically found that nearly half of the pavement in Los Angeles is not actively used for important purposes and could potentially be removed. It's a really fascinating report I recommend you check out. But this is an example from South LA where there was some sort of, asphalt yard that ended up getting transformed into the South LA Wetlands Project. So that was a before, this is the after. So when I say there's potential within cities, uh, there's a lot of potential and what you can create in small spaces and how much biodiversity you can add. This particular project also, filters water and has a bunch of other functions. So it's really kind of a good example of nature-based solutions within a city. And so, there's a lot you can do in small spaces. I'm going to talk a little bit about UCLA and some of our projects, and then happy to just chat about all of this. So UCLA is basically like a city within a city. We are a university campus, daily population about 90,000 people. So we are, I don't know if you can see my mouse, maybe you can't, but this kind of sideways heart-shaped campus down at the bottom with all the brick buildings and some athletic fields. We may be bigger than some of the towns that you might be working with. So we really see our physical campus as a living laboratory for sustainability. I work across all different areas: energy, water, waste, food, procurement, transportation, all of it. But we're also really trying to think about biodiversity. We sit at the base of the Santa Monica Mountains, and so our landscape has the potential to be a living laboratory as well as the physical built environment of the campus. So we did a landscape plan in 2022 and engaged our community and really made biodiversity a core for the landscape plan. We had a colleague, Isaac Brown, he's now at Macmillan, but he had worked with the city to develop the city's ecotopes. And so he was able to do some mapping of connectivity and landscape naturalness on campus and help us really integrate the city biodiversity planning into the campus. And now I have a team of students under our practicum program, which is the environmental science students, who are going to be applying that index that I talked about to the campus as well. Not every metric applies in a campus setting, but a lot of them do. And so really hoping that UCLA can be a model for campuses, not only university campuses, but potentially corporate campuses. We have a corporation we're working with as well, who now has a team of students looking at their campus transformations. So our hope is to be a demonstration for what's possible. And I'm also doing some research at UCLA, and some of my research focuses on campuses globally. And, it hasn't been published yet, but the short version is in a lot of these cities that have biodiversity plans, when I looked at campuses within those cities, very few, a very small percent are doing biodiversity planning. So there's a lot of potential there. So this top corner of campus that's dark blue over here, again, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but you'll see a big dark blue spot in the upper left of the campus. That is Sage Hill. It's one of the most intact areas of campus where we have some remnant habitat, and it's a living, learning kind of area for undergraduate research and teaching across a bunch of different disciplines, which is really exciting. But what we really want to do is kind of build that connectivity across campus from Sage Hill and the Santa Monica Mountains down through campus by mainly through turf replacements. So we started doing some of these projects back in 2012, mainly for water conservation. So this was an early project that actually doesn't have many natives and was mostly drought tolerant, but kind of you can see before and after. Now, as some of these ficus trees have aged out, they've been replaced by coast live oaks. And so we are starting to add more natives in this area. This is another area of campus that was previously grass. Our campus is very dense, a lot of population. So we're also trying to create space for students in addition to habitat. So that includes basically these sort of outdoor study spaces where there's plugs for students, but this area also has a lot of native plants now and hummingbirds. This was another example that was part of a new building construction project, but when they built the building across the street, they were able to transform this mainly grass area into a beautiful parklet that has a mix of natives and other drought tolerant plants. It also has a bioswale to help capture stormwater. Another recent example, again, turf grass, pretty boring, both biologically and aesthetically, has been transformed into a beautiful area with a lot of buckwheat and yarrow and other natives. Um, and, students, faculty, everyone has been responding really well to the transformation. Another example, this was an area that was just ivy. And some of our students in our Brew and Birding Club that I advise got funding from a National Audubon Plants for Birds grant. And with help from our facilities team, we took out all the ivy and they've been planting native plants throughout. And it's turning into this really beautiful pollinator garden. And these are hummingbirds nesting in that area. The project actually got started because we had a faculty member who had hummingbird feeders at her office and was supporting a colony of 200 hummingbirds in the area. So the students, she left for Arizona, but the students are trying to kind of keep Hummingbird Canyon going there. But it's pretty amazing how much life can be supported, even just in small gardens. So we have a campus INAP project that now has over 38,000 observations, about 2,800 species. Those are not all native, but still, and a few thousand folks participating, and that continues to grow, as does all community science. So again, 419 acres, small area, but a lot of diversity and lots of people interacting with nature. And, we find if you build it, they will come. So this is a red-tailed hawk I spotted looking over the Court of Sciences, an area where we've done some transformation with native landscaping there. We have cliff swallows that take advantage of building structures for their nests and get mud from the athletic fields nearby. And we have great horned owls that have been nesting on campus for years and sometimes make use of building ledges for their nests. One lucky faculty member got to have this view from his office. So it really is incredible to see how many different species and how much life there is even on an urban campus. And we'll be kind of tracking this progress as we go along and continue these transformations. And that is all of my little virtual tour. So with that, I'd be happy to take questions and move more into discussion. Hopefully that kept us on time, Melanie.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I'll start with a question and I'll just advise folks, if you have one, feel free to raise your hand or drop it in the chat. I'll be watching that. What have you noticed that surprised you the most about the biodiversity in, I'll just say LA in general or the campus itself?
Yeah, I'm constantly learning more. I didn't prepare for that question specifically, but I brought something special to share because one of the most surprising things has been how really resilient and adaptable our wildlife is. Which is not to say that we don't have to continue improving habitat, but it is amazing where things are surviving. Within our Raptor study last year, we had a red-tailed hawk that nested on this construction crane.
Oh.
And it was during an active construction project. And of course, I was thinking, well, maybe I should have them stop the project. Well, they tried to nest the prior year, and I don't think they were successful, although we're not sure. But then this year they were nesting, and I called up the people, and I was considering, what to do because a crane is like thousands of dollars a week. And they're choosing to nest on construction equipment. But I came and observed, and actually the hawks were just sort of treating it like a tree. They're nesting on the pivot point of this crane. And, these are particularly urban adapted hawks. So after observing them, this was while the crane was being used. And you can see the parent is just sort of chilling at the top, like it's a tree in a windstorm. And the young don't seem particularly disturbed. So I let them continue. We did not halt the construction. They were just kind of using the crane like this once a week. And that nest fledged 3 young red tails. So here's a close up when they were getting close to fledging. So I would say that was the most surprising, this specific nest, but in general, just sort of how wildlife is adapting to the urban area is pretty wild sometimes.
That's so cool.
It was pretty cool. Yeah.
Any other questions from folks?
Hey, Nurit, thank you. First of all, you all have done a lot, so congratulations. It's really cool. Um, do you have any like I don't think you mentioned this, any kind of percentage targets for the campus around native plants or native habitats when, many of the studies show that you need something like 50 to 70% native habitat to really enhance and promote biodiversity. And in many cases, just like a minimum threshold of like 30%. So are there any targets that you all are aiming for in some of these projects?
Yeah, we didn't set a target that way in terms of percent, but I will link our landscape and biodiversity page, which has our landscape plan. And essentially, we are aiming to convert all ornamental turf on campus to native landscaping. Now, it's a slow process given funding challenges. We're in a bit of a budget crisis. But yeah, the only areas that will remain grass are uh, areas that are very actively used by the community as sort of park or event space. But otherwise, I'll try to open our landscape plan here and I can show you a map to give you a sense. It may actually be calculated in the landscape plan, kind of what percent that ends up being, but I just don't have that number in my head.
Right on.
But I'll pull up we have a map in the landscape plan that shows all the turf areas that are targeted for conversion. So that'll give you a good sense.
Thank you.
Yeah. I see the question in the chat about black bear. So I saw that bear video online. Pretty wild. We have not had bears at UCLA, but we do have people who research bears at UCLA. So despite my better judgment, I am a PhD candidate at the same time as doing my full-time work and serving on TWP board, which is probably why I'm sick at the moment. But my colleague who's in my PhD lab, Wilson Sherman, is actually studying black bears and basically human wildlife conflict in Altadena. And he's doing it more from kind of the human perspective and learning a lot by talking to kind of the pro-bear and anti-bear, like people within these communities. There are people who are very protective of the bears, and there are people who are very concerned about the bears in the human habitat. So he's doing super interesting research on that. I'd be happy to introduce you. And I just put a link in the chat to his research. So I don't know personally much about managing bear human conflict, but I do know folks who do, and I'd be happy to introduce you. Other questions?
Kathy, go for it.
I have a question about an opportunity. So I'm in the Bay Area and we've got this big, robust regional park system, and a lot of them are disconnected from one another. And it feels like UCLA, like UC Berkeley, has, you occupy a lot of space. And I'm wondering if there is an opportunity to create some pollinator corridors from the UCLA campus to any of the adjacent or not too distant green spaces as a way to sort of develop a net of wildlife corridors and biodiversity pathways that spring from UCLA.
I love that. I hadn't thought of, it's funny, I've been thinking a lot about the UC system and biodiversity. I forgot to mention, UCLA is a member of Nature Positive Universities, which is a international alliance. And in fact, Berkeley is the only other UC that is also pledged to do biodiversity planning as part of this network. I'll drop the network in the chat. And I've been poking other UCs to see if I can get a little work group going to focus on biodiversity at the campuses. I've thought about the reserve system, but I hadn't really thought about like a symbolic connection. Probably it would be easier to start with like Santa Barbara or Riverside or a closer campus, but I like that idea. In my utility work, DWP participates in an initiative that might sort of inspire some ideas. It's called Power in Pollinators, and it basically works with utilities to plant pollinator supportive plants along transmission lines.
Yeah.
So maybe there's something that could bring those two things together and look at, power corridors between the Bay Area and LA and connecting pollinator pathways along the transmission lines, which probably do exist. But yeah, I'd be happy to talk about that. Within LA County, I know that some colleagues of mine are working on a wildlife connectivity master plan for the county, or maybe it's the South LA County Habitat Connectivity Master Plan, I think is the proper title. So there is a lot of work being done kind of on connectivity down here. And yeah, appreciate that question.
And just one other thing, there's actually left the not Power Nature, the 30 by 30 Sentinel Site Network meeting to come to this one that was actually all about urban biodiversity, which is the topic of the day, it appears. And
cool.
So there's, if you aren't connected to that, I'm happy to have another conversation to just add you to the Urban Nature Coalition, like so many things, this California Urban Nature Alliance and Bay Area Nature Collaborative. So like these things are nascent and
yeah, I've definitely heard of some different urban nature ones, but I'm not sure if I'm on that California urban nature list, and I would love to be. And also happy to join, Bay Area stuff. I may not be able to make it to every meeting, but I like being on email lists and receiving information. So feel free to add me to any and all things that seem related to the work that I'm doing. I'll put my email in the chat there. The UCLA email is probably the best, but yeah, I would say, urban ecology in general is growing quickly, and there are some great national, international California hubs. I'm also part of the California Global Biodiversity Alliance that's working on, the California delegation to COP16. So and there's good intersections there with the UCs as well, and academia. We have, we're working on efforts to try and connect California universities to global policymakers, et cetera. So yeah, happy to connect on all of that.
Great. Any other questions or comments?
Can I ask one more?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So wasn't there just a wolf that entered LA County?
There is. Yes, I saw that headline as well. Super exciting. I think first time in like 100 years or something. So yeah, that was just north of here in the Antelope Valley area. So we'll see what happens there. I live very close to P22 and, mountain lion habitat. I've had a bobcat in my backyard. Not a mountain lion yet, but we'll see. But yeah, having the wolf down here, it's pretty exciting. Speaking of connectivity.
Right. All right. Well, Nurit, I want to say thank you for showing up, even though you're not feeling well. We really appreciate it. And if there was any part of this you feel like you want to watch again, we do have it recorded, and I plan to post it on the Hills for Everyone YouTube channel in the next 48 hours. And at the top of our agenda, which I'll drop a link in the chat here in just a second, I have that available to you so that you don't have to look very far. There's that. And then she will also be presenting at the Southland meeting in March on the 23rd at 11. So if you want to dive back in and learn this again or have it sink in a little bit further.
Or if you have any tips for me of what might be, helpful to include, I can always tweak the presentation for the next group. So really great to connect with everyone here. And if you're not already connecting with folks in the closest city to you when it comes to biodiversity, please do, because again, there's so much potential for connectivity, for connection, for inspiring people to get engaged with broader initiatives and statewide initiatives. For 30 by 30, we had one of our Raptor volunteers here in Los Angeles didn't know anything about birds, picked the study as just a random volunteer opportunity. But she let me know that after being involved in the Raptor study, she now considers herself the Jane Goodall of every house finch in Los Feliz. So that made me extremely happy. And it's been one of my favorite things to recount. But I think there's something to that, an experience with one nest in your backyard or in your neighborhood can really just awaken this whole love of nature and engagement with biodiversity across our state. So got a lot of
Absolutely.
people in cities, and I hope you'll connect with them.
Well, we appreciate the work that you're doing, and we know that in urban environments, it's pretty challenging. So thank you for all you do.